Right now, I am staring at a situation that is actively shattering the American political landscape right before our eyes, and almost no one in the media is piecing it all together. What I'm going to break down for you over the next few minutes goes far beyond just missiles hitting Iran. This is a massive tale of a commander-in-chief who ran on one platform and executed the exact opposite. It's about top brass warning against a conflict, only to be entirely brushed aside. It is the unraveling of a political base that prided itself on ending forever wars, now imploding from within. And the crucial detail everyone is missing? This didn't just begin recently. This started the first massive inconsistencies arose, inconsistencies that were swept under the rug until the rug simply ran out. Right now, I am staring at a situation that is actively shattering the American political landscape right before our eyes, and almost no one in the media is piecing it all together. What I'm going to break down for you over the next few minutes goes far beyond just missiles hitting Iran. This is a massive tale of a commander-in-chief who ran on one platform and executed the exact opposite. It's about top brass warning against a conflict, only to be entirely brushed aside. It is the unraveling of a political base that prided itself on ending forever wars, now imploding from within. And the crucial detail everyone is missing. This didn't just begin recently. This started the first massive inconsistencies arose. Inconsistencies that were swept under the rug until the rug simply ran out. Stay with me for the next 30 minutes, because what I am about to lay out will completely alter how you view not just this specific conflict, but the hidden machinery of American power. If you are new here to the channel, hit subscribe and ring that bell. The markets are waking up soon, and what I'm about to share is going to heavily impact them. Let's rewind a few weeks. The true origin of the U.S. strikes on Iran doesn't begin with explosions. It begins in total silence inside the Oval Office. The kind of silence that falls when top military officials realize their expertise is being ignored, prompting them to start documenting their warnings for the official record. Based on CNN's reporting, the highest-ranking military commanders, including leaders from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, presented well-documented alarms regarding the massive risks of igniting a broader Middle Eastern war well before any trigger was pulled. These weren't subtle hints. They looked the president directly in the eye, cautioning that launching a widespread assault on Iran would result in American casualties and severely drain our already stretched munitions reserves. Let that sink in. Already stretched munitions reserves. We aren't talking about an armed forces at 100% capacity. We are looking at a stockpile heavily depleted by years of sending arms to Ukraine, the Pacific, and other parts of the Middle East. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs explicitly advised the president that the price of this intervention would be paid in blood and long-term strategic readiness. Trump publicly waved off reports of this opposition as, to use his exact words, 100% incorrect. Yet CNN corroborated that these deep concerns were entirely factual, voiced by multiple high-ranking generals, and delivered in formal national security briefings. So, either the president was completely oblivious to his own top generals' warnings, or he knew, deliberately ignored them, and then went on TV to deny it ever occurred. That is not a minor oversight. That is a catastrophic breakdown of trust at the absolute highest levels of government. If this is making sense, hit the like button so this reaches the people who need to hear it, and let me know in the comments. Did you predict this happening? Let's break down the exact sequence of events, because you need to understand every layer to grasp the full reality. Bombshell number 1. The U.S. launched a massive wave of strikes against Iranian assets. These weren't precise symbolic slaps on the wrist. This was a heavy, widespread bombardment, and in the subsequent days, American forces kept the pressure up with more strikes. The most heavily scrutinized of these, an attack that reportedly left close to 150 people dead, is now being assessed by investigators as highly likely to have been an American operation. Really process that. This isn't just a rumor. Professional forensic investigators whose sole job is to analyze combat strikes are pointing to the U.S. for a single attack that killed roughly 150 people, with reports indicating a school was among the collateral damage. When was the last time we saw this level of devastation with this much of a shoulder shrug regarding accountability? The administration's official stance, delivered by the president himself, was essentially, We may have casualties. That often happens in war. Sadly, there will likely be more. That was it. No urgent investigation, no detailed, transparent report, not even a fabricated show of sympathy for the grieving families. Just, that is what happens in war. A combat veteran watching this play out stated something that perfectly pierced through the standard political spin. He essentially said that it makes him sick to watch politicians and pundits, people who have no concept of the visceral horror of combat, who have never felt the gut-wrenching pain of losing a brother in arms to high explosives, cheer this on. He pointed out the hypocrisy of leaders telling the public to brace for casualties when it's the working class, not the politicians, doing the bleeding. That isn't just a partisan jab. That is the raw truth from someone who intimately understands the genuine price of these boardroom decisions. Bombshell number 2. This one didn't just stun the political left. It caused a massive seismic shift within Trump's own base. The official reasons given for this military action have changed repeatedly. According to lawmakers who sat in on classified intelligence briefings, the stated objective for this campaign morphed 4 or 5 times in just a matter of days. Let's trace this, because the timeline is crucial. Initially, the rationale was Iran's missile capabilities. The White House cited the looming danger of long-range Iranian weapons, but that immediately hit a roadblock. Officials had previously boasted that Iran's nuclear infrastructure had been, in Trump's words, completely and totally obliterated during a prior strike. So, which narrative is true? Was the threat already wiped out, or was it still a massive danger? When reporters grilled the administration about these glaring contradictions, officials doubled down, stating they were confident the nuclear sites were destroyed. The president even addressed the nation saying they had a high degree of confidence. They had hit where Iran kept its enriched uranium. However, that confidence was absolutely not a consensus within the broader intelligence community, and simply saying the word confident at a podium doesn't make the internal discrepancies vanish. Soon after, the rationale pivoted entirely to protecting U.S. allies. This raised massive red flags for Congress, because if the primary danger was to Israel and not the American homeland, the entire constitutional and legal justification for the president acting alone fundamentally shifts. One Democratic representative spelled it out on the House floor. There was no immediate threat to the U.S. from Iran. The threat was to Israel. Treating a threat to an ally as identical to an imminent threat to the American homeland places us in legally unprecedented waters, and this is where the plot thickens. The briefings given to congressional staff by the Pentagon directly clashed with the narrative spun by the White House. Pentagon officials told staffers that Iran wasn't plotting a direct attack on America. Instead, the fear was that if Israel attacked Iran, Iran would retaliate against U.S. targets. Those two stories are completely incompatible. Either Iran was about to strike America unprovoked, or the U.S. jumped into a preemptive war to shield Israel from the blowback of its own military actions. Yet the administration has peddled both stories depending on the day. The Secretary of State said one thing, the Pentagon said another. Then the White House attacked the press for simply pointing out the inconsistencies. This goes way beyond a PR blunder. It is a fatal collapse of credibility. A top political analyst summarized it perfectly. The administration hasn't offered a unified story. Instead, they've scrambled week to week, constantly tripping over their own previous statements. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. We are tracking this massive story as it unfolds, and you will want to be here for the next major update. Bombshell number 3, and almost nobody predicted the scale of this. The internal civil war within the MAGA movement is entirely real. It is speeding up, and it threatens to permanently alter the American political landscape for decades. You have to realize how vital this specific issue was to their entire platform. A massive pillar of the MAGA coalition was an absolute rejection of endless foreign wars and Middle Eastern nation-building. This wasn't a minor talking point. It was the core of the movement. It was shouted at rallies, baked into campaign promises, and repeated constantly. Donald Trump himself looked into the cameras and swore, "I will not send American kids to fight and die in the Middle East." That vow has now been shattered. And the most devout believers in that promise are now the loudest critics. Major conservative voices, podcasters, and influencers, people who built massive empires preaching America first, non-intervention, and staying out of foreign conflicts, are now openly demanding answers from their own leaders. One major conservative voice publicly demanded to know the whereabouts of J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard, furious that they were remaining silent while the administration reversed course on everything they campaigned on. He pointed out that they were all on tape promising no more foreign wars and no more regime change. That is not a left-wing pundit. That is a foundational architect of the America First media ecosystem, publicly torching the politicians he helped put in power. And then came an even heavier accusation from within that same camp, the claim that American troops aren't dying for the U.S., but rather for the strategic benefits of Israel or Iran. Pause and really digest that. A leading voice inside the MAGA base is explicitly claiming American blood is being spilled for foreign nations. That is not a minor policy squabble. That is a devastating fracture in the very foundation of the coalition. And it is echoing across the aisle. Inside Congress, a progressive Democrat fresh out of a classified briefing blasted the operation, comparing it to the weapons of mass destruction lies of Iraq 2.0. He pointed out that it won't be the children of politicians or billionaires putting on boots and carrying rifles. It will be working-class Americans sent to die in an illegal war. He furiously highlighted the hypocrisy of burning billions of dollars a day overseas while politicians claim we can't afford basic health care at home. The estimated cost of this conflict? Roughly $1 billion every single day, according to multiple reports. Now let's pivot to the real-world consequences, because the numbers are grim. Recent CNN polling reveals that roughly 60% of Americans strongly disapprove of these Iranian airstrikes. Nearly 6 in 10 citizens say they outright do not trust the president to make the correct choices regarding military force in Iran. And a full 60% believe the administration has absolutely zero coherent plan for what to do next. Let those statistics sink in. That isn't just standard political friction. When a solid majority of the country explicitly distrusts the commander-in-chief during an active military campaign, you are looking at a real-time crisis of legitimacy, and the Republican infighting is happening completely out in the open. Neoconservative figures like Senator Lindsey Graham are hitting the airwaves, demanding even more aggressive escalation, urging the U.S. to join forces with Israel to strike Hezbollah and wipe out Iran's proxies entirely. But that hawkish faction is now in a vicious public tug-of-war with the America First isolationists. The president is stuck right in the middle, attempting to appease both completely incompatible sides. That is a recipe for political and strategic disaster. We are about halfway through. If you are finding this breakdown valuable, please hit that like button and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this split in the conservative base is permanent, or will it vanish when the bombing stops? Let's look at how this impacts your wallet, not just geopolitics. The operational burn rate for this military campaign is an estimated $1 billion a day. Officials have hinted this could drag on until September. Do the math. 5 months of active engagement at $1 billion a day brings you to a staggering $150 billion in direct costs. And that doesn't even touch the massive long-term expense of replenishing those drained munitions stockpiles the generals were so worried about. You can't just flip a switch and print more missiles. The U.S. Defense Industrial Base was already struggling to keep up with supply chain bottlenecks from the war in Ukraine. Opening up a massive new front is a logistical nightmare. If you work in the defense sector, you know exactly what I mean. The demand is surging, but the manufacturing capacity simply isn't there. If you work in the energy sector, pay close attention. Iranian crude is effectively erased from the global market as long as bombs are falling. Global supply chains are scrambling. Market experts warn that while initial volatility was expected, the massive ripple effects of a prolonged war are entirely unaccounted for. If your local economy relies on stable global trade, brace yourself. The Middle East is heavily interconnected. Chaos there spikes global shipping costs, sends insurance premiums through the roof, and forces major corporations and wealth funds to completely recalculate their global risk. And here is the brutal reality. Once global alliances shift, they rarely shift back. Nations watching the U.S. launch major military campaigns with no clear objective, shifting excuses, and deep domestic division are actively rethinking their reliance on American stability. Let's look at the map. The Persian Gulf facilitates about 20% of all global oil shipments. Millions of barrels transit the Strait of Hormuz daily. Iran has repeatedly vowed to choke off that waterway if attacked. If that strait is blocked, even for a few days, the resulting energy shockwave will hit every single economy on Earth. Europe, already strained by energy crises, would be devastated. Asia, which relies heavily on Gulf crude, would suffer immediately. And ordinary Americans would feel the brutal reality at the gas pump almost overnight. This isn't fear-mongering, it's basic math. This is exactly what the top brass was terrified of when they warned against escalation. The gamble wasn't just the tragic loss of American soldiers. The gamble was destabilizing a highly fragile global economy. We are already seeing the tremors in the stock market. Defense contractors are surging while shipping, and aviation stocks are taking a beating. Wall Street analysts are aggressively pricing in a war premium on oil futures. Massive institutions like Goldman Sachs are already telling their wealthy clients how to shield their assets from the fallout. This isn't a game. This is institutional money preparing for the worst. The darkest irony here is who ultimately pays the toll. The working-class families who view military service as a vital stepping stone for education and upward mobility are the exact same demographic that overwhelmingly backed the promise to end these foreign entanglements. That is a profound moral failure that won't just disappear with the next news cycle. So, where do we go from here? I only see two viable avenues, and there is no comfortable middle ground. Path number 1. The administration secures a diplomatic off-ramp to save face. After taking heavy hits, Iranian leaders use back channels, likely via nations like Oman or Qatar, to signal they are ready to talk. The White House spins whatever minor agreement they reach as a historic triumph. They claim the bombings were the necessary leverage to force peace. A ceasefire is signed, the fighting stops, and the massive cracks within the political base are temporarily masked by a parade of victory laps. For this to work, Iran must decide that taking more hits isn't worth the pride, and America must be willing to accept a highly compromised version of winning. It's difficult, but possible. Path number 2. The death spiral. Iran or one of its heavily armed proxy groups launches a devastating counterattack on U.S. bases or assets in the region. The White House is trapped. They can't absorb the blow politically, so they retaliate with even more force. This triggers a massive, uncontrollable regional war. The fragile diplomatic web holding the Middle East together completely snaps. Suddenly, $1 billion a day looks like a bargain. The internal conservative civil war becomes fatal to the party's future, and the massive chasm between what the president promised and the bloody reality he delivered becomes impossible to defend. Remember what that representative said on the House floor. In just 24 hours, the justification bounced from imminent threat to regime change to nuclear weapons, and back to imminent threat. That perfectly encapsulates this disaster. It's not just a single lie or a solitary mistake. It is an endless parade of shifting excuses from a leadership team that clearly decided to attack first and brainstorm a justification later. The top generals warned them. The intelligence agencies doubted them. Key global allies were completely left in the dark, stranding thousands of American citizens in a rapidly deteriorating war zone without warning. And yet, the entire Republican political machine initially fell in line, not because the strategy made sense, but out of blind habit. Until now. Because the fractures are now entirely public, and once a dam starts to crack, it rarely holds. Here is my final takeaway. America has plunged into a war with a major Middle Eastern power with zero coherent endgame. It did so over the loud objections of its own top military minds. It is costing $1 billion a day. It has already resulted in the alleged killing of 150 people in a single strike by U.S. forces, and it is completely tearing apart the political coalition that promised it would never happen. I firmly believe we are heading down path 2. I have feared that since the very first contradictions leaked, contradictions too massive and glaring to simply PR away. But in this chaotic landscape, things change by the hour. My final question to you is this. When the domestic political cost becomes too heavy to bear, and with 60% of the country already disapproving, we might be there right now, how does America actually get out of this? And who gets stuck with the check because the bill always comes due? Is this administration actually putting America first or feeding it into a meat grinder? And when the smoke finally clears, which global power is actually going to emerge stronger from this chaos? I want to read your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this deep dive helped you connect the dots that mainstream media is ignoring, please share the video. This is exactly what we strive to do here: cut through the noise and expose the architecture underneath. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.